The stupid, it hurts! The stupid, it hurts!
Don't worry, Deflating Atheism, I'm here to rescue you from your painful case of stupid. The first thing you need to do is explain why you think mathematical truth exists independent of human minds.
An incorrectly derived mathematical theorem is still an incorrectly derived mathematical theorem, no matter if people agree on it, which is why we have a basis for saying it's incorrectly derived later on.
We've invented rules by which we do these derivations, but the existence of these rules is not evidence that math exists outside of human minds.
Which is why minority views can eventually be accepted as true, which is the same as any other truth that exists independently of people's minds.
But it's not exclusive to truths which are independent of people's minds. The fact that minority views can become majority views in no way demonstrates that those truths extend beyond the minds of the majority.
The very fact that you believe X to be true rather than Y is a truth independent of my own mind, so the very possibility of disagreement is an implicit affirmation of mind-independent truths.
It's an implicit affirmation that truths are not confined to one specific mind, but it does not affirm that they extend beyond all human minds. The fact that there are 3 feet to a yard everywhere in the universe does not mean that the notions of feet and yards are not made-up human conventions. Euler's identity is perfectly analogous to this.
No, because Euler's identity is not simply asserted as some analytic truth claim, rather it is derived from correct axioms through correct deduction.
Mathematical axioms are just as analytical, that is, true by definition, as the assertion that there are 3 feet to a yard. Deductions derived from analytical statements are also analytical statements. Analytical statements are true even if there's no mind-independent reality at all, so their truth does not demonstrate that they exist independent of human minds.
Now, I know of one derivation, and perhaps there are others, but what's interesting about this derivation is that there are parts to it that don't relate to our own experience, like imaginary numbers.
This is false. We can't see an imaginary number of rocks like we can see 3 rocks, but we do still use imaginary numbers in some descriptions of experience, Schrodinger's equation for example, and we find that those equations are effective at describing experience. In that sense, we do experience imaginary numbers, albeit indirectly.
And other parts that do relate to our own experience, like trigonometric functions, so you can't take this mathematical truth and simply box it away as either being an analytic truth claim or a description of nature. You're forced to confront the fact that there exist mathematical truths independently of our own minds.
How? All pure mathematical truth claims, if true, are analytical truth claims. They are conceptually inherent to the concepts and axioms from which they are derived. 2 plus 2 equals 4 because 2 plus 2 is 4. 2 plus 2 is one of the ways we can define 4. The same is true of Euler's identity. E to the I pi plus 1 equals 0 because e to the I pi plus 1 is 0. It is one of the ways we can define 0. Euler's identity is an analytical statement. Actually, how could ideas which are not essentially spatiotemporal even be effective at modeling a spatiotemporal universe?
Because mathematics is the language of physics, and our ability to model anything that happens anywhere in the universe depends on both physical laws and mathematical laws being constant.
Why would being constant require being non-spatiotemporal? Modeling the behavior of space and time only requires being constant everywhere within space and time. It in no way requires any ontology beyond time and space or independent of all time and space.
Now, if mathematics were spatiotemporally contingent, as you say, there would be one thing here and another thing here and another thing here.
No, it fucking wouldn't. Being constant at all points in time and space is not evidence of existence independent of time and space. If numbers and laws are non-spatiotemporal, what are they?
They are abstract objects.
Which are what exactly? What does it mean to say that an abstract object exists?
Okay, so let's run with your notion that ideas are simply physical processes of brains, and we have 2 people both with the idea of an apple, and as outside observers, we could see some electrical activity going on in this person's brain, some electrical activity going on in this person's brain. So, what about them is the same? What can we observe about both of them that is the same without assuming our own conclusion that they both have the idea of an apple? And And what in any case does this electrical activity have to do with an apple?
The neurological activity is a recapitulation of the activity created when an apple has been experienced. When we imagine experiences, fMRIs can see activity in the same parts of the brain that are activated when we actually experience those experiences. When we imagine a sound, for example, we see some of the same brain activity as when we actually hear that sound.
And I assume you believe in the possibility of artificial intelligence, right? So now we have a computer program that has the idea of an apple. Well, doesn't that just explode your whole notion that ideas are simply physical activities of brains?
No, because to create such a computer would be to create a brain. This certainly wouldn't undermine my point that ideas are patterns of physical activity. And if a god created the universe, how did this interaction take place? Which of the four known kinds of interaction mediated this act of creation?
It does not necessarily follow, however, that the four fundamental interactions of physics are the only possible kinds of causes there are. That does not follow in any case.
I never said that this followed. What I said was that if you can demonstrate that there is another kind of interaction, you should collect your Nobel Prize. The burden of proof is on the apologist to demonstrate the existence of this so far undetected form of interaction.
Okay, God interacted with the universe, whatever. God continues to interact with the universe. But it's not my view that God is one of the four fundamental interactions of physics.
I never said it was. What I accused you of is believing in some fifth interaction that has somehow eluded physicists. Maybe this interaction exists, but why should I believe in it if it hasn't been demonstrated as well as the other interactions have?
It's not my view that the four fundamental interactions of physics are the only possible kinds of interactions. That's your baby, it's not my baby. That's your fucking incoherent view, okay? It's not mine.
I never said that this was my view or your view. That's why entanglement is not listed among the fundamental interactions.
So poof goes your entire moronic premise. It died at your own hand. The four fundamental interactions aren't even the only kinds of interactions in physics.
No. The fundamental interactions are called fundamental because all known interactions reduce to them. That's what fundamental means. If physicists agreed that entanglement is an interaction, they would either say that it reduces to one or more of the four known interactions, or they would revise the list of fundamental interactions to include it, and the textbooks from now on would say that there are 5 fundamental interactions. The reason the textbooks don't say that is that it is not the consensus of physicists that entanglement is an interaction.